Vice President for Enrollment Management at Santa Clara University. And I'll tell you before we get started, you can get access to the slide deck whenever you want when we're done here. So don't worry about trying to copy down. There's some slides that I think are worth handing out to people. I think I have the best job in enrollment management right now, being retired. I have great appreciation for all the work you're still doing and with all the new wrinkles to it. But there's been a lot of wrinkles. I retired after 11 years at Santa Clara. Before that, I was 18 years at Lewis and Clark in Portland, Oregon, 7 years at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, and 5 years at Juniata College in Pennsylvania. So that's 41 years for those who are counting that up. So I did my time. That's good. But I can tell you that being retired is nice, but it's fun to keep your hand in this. I worked a little bit part-time for Duolingo English test. If you don't accept that, you should. And now I'm on the advisory board of two companies, the College Guidance Network, acknowledging the fact that a lot of schools don't have much college guidance talent available to them. And more pertinent to this session, the My Footpath out of Chicago. We'll talk over that in a moment. My colleagues Steve and Chris will introduce themselves shortly. So we plan on having time for questions, so that'll be good. And the QR code should take care of things. And if you really are anxious, you can scan that code, take it back, and probably scare your president or your provost into doing something, maybe, who knows. But let's get a little show of hands of who's here. How many are four-year publics? Four-year privates? Two-year people? Any other enrollment junkies? A couple. That's right. Well, if you are still in enrollment at this point and asking yourselves that question, you already know some of the answers. But each of your markets could be mildly or wildly different than the person sitting next to you. So this is going to be from a 30,000-foot vantage point, but there are some universals that you probably are all going through post-COVID. You've already had belt tightening. You've had budget freezes or reductions, staff or faculty positions frozen or reduced. But as you're all going through this coming out of COVID thing, that's still an unknown entity for a lot of people. You're dealing with what's hybrid, what's working from home, on campus, what's your delivery system after you've worked for a couple of years learning how to deliver online. Do all your faculty want to go back to having everyone just in a classroom? I'll give you a clue. The research from students would say they still want some online. So hopefully you're not going all the way back. And perhaps, just maybe, your president or CFO would like you to maybe recover some of that lost net tuition revenue from the last couple of years. So, piece of cake, right? And this is all before we get to the infamous demographic cliff in 2025. Good times. So there are a few realities that we're already faced with. And you can read the fine print and actually see where this is from. How many have graduate in their portfolio? Okay, well, that's not good. Enrollment is down in 26 states, and in particular, there's 9 states. Just this last year, it went down over 4%. Those 9 states: Alaska, Arkansas, California, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Mississippi, Montana, and Nebraska. But if you dig further into that one chunk of data, if you are a master's only institution, it actually went up last year. PhD programs are having difficulties. So undergraduate data is not much better. If you've talked to the folks at the National Clearinghouse, and you should if you have not, look at this all sectors year to year from spring enrollments. From 2019 to 20, it went down 1.2%. Next year, 2.4%. Next year, 3.1%. Last year, only 0.5%. So is that good or just less bad? Those are small percentages, but that added up to 1.4 million fewer students. And some of you think that most of them came from your pool, but I think everybody probably got hit a little bit, and nobody's strategic plan, however old it is, planned on a 3-year decline, my guess. And if you have a strategic plan that's printed, bound document that's the Bible and doesn't adjust, that's not a good thing. Hopefully you've made some adjustments. And again, this is still before the demographic cliff. So you or your predecessor lived through this decade. Wasn't that fun? It wasn't easy, even if you weren't in a dark red state. We're not saying it was ever easy. But if you were in the dark red state, you can see that decline over the decade, it made it a little more difficult. And again, all markets are localized. This is 30,000 foot. It does not take into account whether you were 2-year, 4-year, urban, rural, big, little, rich, poor, selective, non-selective. And differences by gender or race, if I can still say that. And of course, many other statuses that are in the goals that we have in our strategic plan. So if you live through that and you're here still, that means you got some commitment. I respect that. If we have time at the end, ask me about the story about the 3 envelopes. By the way, a great source for this kind of data, besides the wishy Western Interstate booklets of Knocking on the Door, is Nathan Graw's books. They were mentioned at some other sessions. When his first book came out in 2018, Demographics and the Demand for Higher Education, I bought copies of it for all of the cabinet members at Santa Clara. Scared the heck out of me, which was the intent. And even his new book, he can still scare people if they'll read the book. So, by the way, if you didn't go to an earlier session, Rob and Joel back here did a great session this morning. Theirs was entitled Mapping the Enrollment Landscape of the Near Future. It also had great slides and data that you should use and distribute to people you want to sober up or listen to you or anything else, because it's affecting all of us. So if you add in the next decade, things change a little bit. The bleeding changes a little bit. But again, is that better or just less bad? We're all dealing with this phenomenon. And that gives you no indication of changes in diversity, academic preparation, pandemic lack of preparation that are affecting the people walking in the door and who your faculty want to have walk in their doors. But if you are located in one of these dark red states, it might be time to think outside the box a little bit and or prepare your resume. I'm a realist. So what are you seeing in your office? Even if you have enough applicants, enough deposits, enough enrollments, do you have the staff to serve them? Not just get them in the door, but to serve them when they get there. There's a lot written about this. You guys mentioned it this morning. So more audience participation. How many of you started this academic year with at least one vacancy in your enrollment division? How many had 2 or more? How many still have an opening in your enrollment division? This is the reality. Whether you're, like some people talked about in another session, you're a rural area, it's hard to get people to come visit you, or if you're in Silicon Valley where industry will hire them and pay them double, the next reality is even if you have them, you have to keep them. If you don't burn them out and they leave of their own choice, they get poached. There's always a bigger fish swimming by, it seems. So keeping them is going to be a challenge. This should scare presidents. By the way, presidents are staying fewer and fewer years in their jobs. That changes those of us on the cabinet. That's the one thing that's our threat. You know, that all of a sudden that advocate we had is a different person who might have different goals, different agenda, not the person who hired you to do X, Y, and Z. They want A, B, and C. They probably still want X, Y, and Z too, plus A, B, and C. So that's the difficulty that you're going to go through. But if you're meeting all of those goals, I would say the value of all of you in this room has gone up. So next time you're negotiating your contract, do it seriously. You're more valuable than they think, and when you go back and show them these slides and what you do, you should be able to do even better. I'm talking multi-year contracts and all kinds of good stuff. It's all negotiable at this point. It's no longer what happened. I started in 79, and somewhere in the 90s, our value ramped up big time. And we started getting paid. Not as much as development, but we started getting paid. So that's a good thing. So I'm here to suggest that because the funnel is getting to be a problem with the 2025 demographic cliff, we're ignoring a big pool of students. Those people that have had a previous relationship with your institution. I'm talking about two pools. Those that applied and did not enroll, went somewhere else. And of course, those that you enrolled and they left. Part of the 40 plus million Americans with some college credit and no degree. At one point, they raised their hands to you. And for some reason, they said goodbye, and we probably let them go. Maybe there was a perfunctory exit interview by student affairs, and they told you, well, it's personal, or it's financial, or whatever, and they're gone. Very few of you probably have somebody in your division whose job is re-enrolling those people. And we're going to talk to two examples where it actually can be done. And as the numbers would indicate, it's the only pool that's growing. The people that have left you. That 40 million is going to keep going up in the United States. The graduation rates are anemic in some cases. Slight changes can make a huge difference, both in terms of graduation rates, which your state wants, your institution wants, your alumni office wants. There's all kinds of reasons why this is win-win-win. So we'll take a look at that. We're going to start out first looking at how you might respond internally. And so we're going to turn this over to Steve, and he'll lead us through how one institution approached all of this.
Mike, I think you've got the clicker over
Yep.
there. I've been in the industry for just over 20 years, served a number of different roles from academic affairs, adjunct faculty, student affairs, overseeing housing, student life, and have really settled in the enrollment management side of things. As the slide shows, we are in the middle of the state of Georgia, as our name even says, too. We're one of 26 public institutions in Georgia. We've got 4 different versions of public schools on the university side. State colleges, state universities, comprehensive universities, and then our research universities. What's unique about us, we were merged back in, wrapped up with it back in 2015, where we get our name as Middle Georgia State University. 2 state colleges brought together. The state colleges were access-based institutions that were predominantly associate degree granting. And being a very young institution, there's still a lot that we're still working out right now that hasn't been done. And so for all of you who are maybe in a more regional state university, I'm sure you can identify with there's always opportunity to still refine some basic things overall. Also unique about us, we have an access mission still as a state university, but we also have doctoral programs. We've got 2. So it's a lot of fun. And as we do that on 5 different campuses, the 3 that are pictured up there are kind of our main ones, where we have residential facilities. The middle one is our Eastman campus. Our flagship program is the aviation program. It's a middle school kid's dream. Yeah, pull up to the campus. You've got 2 runways, 54 airplanes, and helicopters, and it's just a lot of fun. It's also very wild. If anybody has an aviation program, you know what I mean. It's just very different. The other part is the other two campuses are very regional focused, and so they are more of just like a couple hundred students truly serving the needs of that small community around it. What great news for us, we're excited about that we did have the 8,000 students. We reached that this year, which is just about a 5% enrollment growth for us overall. And we've now had 2 consecutive semesters of enrollment growth with significant improvements on a lot of areas, but along with some focus on new enrollment as well too, which I'll dabble in just a little bit.
I just want to point out those 2 semesters ever since they hired him.
There you go. Coincidence.
Yeah, it was more the pandemic stopped, and I just came in to be the saving grace, right? But I'll take credit. All joking aside, though, the other part is that's worthy of noting is our president is one of the longest serving presidents in our system. He's at 10 years now, but out of the 26 institutions, the majority have had turnover in presidents within the last 2 to 3 years. And so that notion about staff, it's not just the staff that we oversee, but also the ones that we report to, which has quite an impact. Go to the next slide. The goals, so we all have certain goals and expectations that we have to meet. In our system, we have our goals, but then also the institution. Our system office has recently decided to launch a strategic enrollment management plan itself. First time we've ever done it as a system. My understanding is there aren't many systems that have done that from a big, 40,000 foot view. So it's pretty exciting to see this happen. It's also great when they do that when there's actually somebody that knows enrollment management, which there is in that role doing it. Some of the big things that they're working on that's been one of relief to us is that they've recognized the argument of value has to be contended, and so they are taking that on as a system, and so they're willing to put dollars behind marketing across the state to actually help with emphasizing the value of a college degree. That had been prior up to the institutions themselves, so that's a little bit of a lift off of our back, which is great. The other part, as a state school, is we are really trying to gather back. There's 78,000 students that leave the state of Georgia for online studies. Predominantly the big ones that if we were in a room, I'd be happy to name other than this one, but I think you could probably guess who they are. But they're going to about 3 different institutions outside of our state. We're looking to reclaim those as much as possible. What's interesting is that as a system, we do annual projections on enrollments, and they are projecting as a reflection of the cliff, a flat to even decrease at a number of institutions. But yet we still have a drive to grow enrollment. And so you can, kind of do your head back and forth and say, which way am I going today? Are we trying to keep flat or are we trying to grow? It's just this interesting focus.
Well, flat is the new up.
Right. We got to tell my school, I have my system that though. Also, based on all the clearinghouse data that we've heard with the tens of millions of students with some college, no degree, there's a significant push in Georgia to, of course, reclaim those back into the higher education system, and then, of course, into the workforce, leading from the system level as well to those initiatives. And then the last major focus that I'll talk about is we just recently launched our version of a direct admission program in the States. And so our state has the public school universities, the 26 of us, but we also have a public technical system that would be more like a community college system overall. And so the program itself was just launched where letters went home to the hundreds of thousands of high school seniors, letting them know the institutions that they would qualify for admission on based on their GPA. So not truly direct admitting the students, but letting them know you could get into these schools if you simply apply. Leading them to a QR code in which they have to log into and actually can see the schools again, and then request information or actually go down that admission route. An interesting piece there is that as an access school, we're not really sure what that's going to do to us. We've already seen admit days at high schools change the dynamic of where we address the funnel. We're not sure if this is going to also change that as well, or if it'll be just like my son, who actually looks at the letter and says, "Dad, this is too long. I don't want to look at it at all." So it's still going to play out, but I know a number of states have varieties of these direct admit programs going on, and I'm sure some of you can identify with those. Institutionally, more locally, we just launched our strategic plan, where we have committed to growing to 8,750 students in 5 years. So at 8,000, we've got a slight growth every year in order to make that feels very achievable for us, even with some of the challenges that we're facing with the enrollment cliff and competition. More locally, though, as many have focused on in online learning, and as we did initially, we have not regained our on-campus presence yet. And as a state school with our dorms, they are built on state bonds. And so we have bills that have to be paid. We have to drive that revenue in, otherwise we can't make the bond payment. You don't want to be the school that doesn't make your bond payment. And so we have a serious focus on filling our housing as much as possible, and a lot of work to do in that area. And of course that trickles into other auxiliaries too, where our student life center is also built on bonds. Our athletic department is run on student fees. Our police are run, public safety are run on student fees. And so we have to make sure that those fees, when they're brought in only by on-campus students, are coming back overall too. So it's a big focus of us from a revenue standpoint. And then lastly, our third main focus is to make sure that those regional campuses are regaining enrollments. And so when everybody went online, so did a lot of the students at those campuses, the campuses we're serving. And so we're re-energizing where we can actually draw people back to those campuses and have a focus. So that's where we are. The next thing is, what have we done? And so I emphasize again that some of these things are basics, right? And I'm sure that at some institutions, when you go in there, you can realize the same. I talked to Dave earlier, the same thing, right? At a larger school with more reputation than Middle Georgia, a lot of it was basic also. And that's just an easy win for a lot of us along the ways. I guess then we move on after that, right? We find our niche and then go do it again someplace else. So some of the things that we've done is, one, we have started to look at populations outside of our region. We're in a competitive area. We realize the cliff is going to hit us, and so we have to start establishing roots in other places. Georgia is one of the places we're thankful that it's going to hit us a little bit later than everybody else, and so it's not really till 2027 that we start to feel the decline in high school graduates. But we have felt the pressure from all of you when you've come to our state to recruit our students, and so we've seen you there. We know who you are. But we're working now on expanding our reach. And so we've started for the first time, we now have international efforts to recruit students. We are sending recruiters to countries, we're partnering with agents to try and build that base, and we're working on articulations for feeders for schools in other countries as well too. It's a necessity for us. They also come at a higher rate of tuition. One of those international students makes about 3 regional in-state students from a tuition revenue standpoint. The other is we have border waivers, so any state that borders Georgia, we can give in-state tuition to. And so we've also, now we don't have the bandwidth to send people to all of those states, and so we've partnered with some tech company to get in front of those schools to see when interest has been expressed. And at that point, we then send a recruiter in to the region when there's enough traffic and activity there. But we're having to find those out-of-state students in international. The next is reinvigorating our transfer process. There was a great opportunity, and it continues to be for us. We're kind of at the infancy of this one, but with just making sure that we're maximizing the amount of credits that are coming from our technical school partners. We're still working through some culture shifts where they've been perceived as being lesser than what we may be. And so we're working on overcoming those internally and working to bring in more credits to be more attractive to the students that are applying, and then also to seal them up in the admissions process and graduate them a lot faster as well too. So that's a big complete shift for us. We've also been heavily pushing corporate outreach, and we've done some local companies that we've partnered with. Geico is one that's locally, Coca-Cola is one that's locally, but then we've also gone to other regions. We've partnered with the 3rd largest school system to try and fill their teacher needs, and we partnered with Amazon formally, and we've also partnered with Delta. And so we're looking to get into other areas. We're going to some of their hubs to try and also attract students from other regions as well too. All in those lines of trying to find new pipelines for us. One of our biggest opportunities though has been our student success metrics. And in this area, we have retention rates that were severely challenged. Our year-to-year retention rates were in the low 50s. Our graduation rates were in the mid-20s. And so we've been significantly changing and focusing on that. And we're seeing some really early advancements. 1 year gains of 7 percentage points in retention and 10 percentage points in second year cohort retention. So we're excited about that. But it's one of the biggest areas we can focus on, just keeping who we bring in. Financial aid is just one of those areas that if we can get it perfectly right, we'd never get it perfectly right, but if we can get it better, we'll certainly help the students, as the affordability is one of the biggest challenges for us. We've taken scholarships now and moved them away from our university advancement from an awarding standpoint. They've been the ones to award the students through an application process. And so we've now eliminated the application, and we are awarding those to the students in the financial aid office based on need. And that's been a dramatic shift for us, as we're getting students who truly need the money and are likely to be dropped for not paying. We're saving them now, so we're pretty excited about that. We're also looking on where we can gain a lot of efficiencies. I'd equate our financial aid office, and I wouldn't mind saying this if they were in front of me, I'm comfortable with it, to the 80s. They're doing everything manually, right, and looking students up individually. We're working to get into the 2000s right now. So we're changing a lot of our processes, automating things, and getting away from individual student packaging. There's also, and on my sheet it's yellow, so I can't see it so well. With our programs, we've worked with academic affairs in order to assess where our programs are and launching new ones. So we did just authorize and are starting to enroll for the spring our second doctoral program. We've also launched some new master's programs. And more importantly, we're looking at those programs that are fully online and determining, can they be offered on our campuses instead? And so we've been able to shift some of our graduate programs on campus to attract the international students, as well as some of our undergraduate programs where we need to attract the students into housing to bring those back onto the campus where they had not been. And lastly,
Steve, did you stop doing any programs?
So we've shifted. I'd say it's a nicer way to say it. So an example would be, we were doing music performance and art, design. We have shifted those into more of a business and production side of the area. We haven't had to necessarily close any programs yet. There are some that are definitely on the radar of having to improve. Otherwise, they may face that. And then lastly, Sherry's, before I segue, is that we've focused a lot on our stop outs. And this is another one that ties to some of the others. When we look at bandwidth, this is one of the hard ones to keep up with. And so we have two types of stop outs, those that are gone for a semester and come back. And that typically falls on our advising team. And with pools that are substantial, they're usually focusing strictly on those students that are in front of them that are currently there for the semester. So to follow up takes a lot of initiative, and usually somebody from outside of the advising area to do that. The other is those who have stopped out for over a year. We call those readmits. And so we're pushing to have those come back. In that process, we've reached out, put the list through the college tracker at the clearinghouse, determined who's actually going somewhere else and completed their degree, taken them off the list, come back and scraped it to see who actually qualifies to come back and would actually be eligible for financial aid, and then done recruitment campaigns to them and gotten them back into our pipeline that comes through admissions. Significant amount of work. We've enrolled anywhere from 702 to 770 of those students each year for the past 3 years. But it is a significant lift for us. Go to that last slide. And so some of the challenges we're facing, certainly we feel really good about what we're doing, but there's a lot of systems that we just need to work through and update. And this goes all the way to our student information system, to our financial aid operations, to working with our IR team and having the quickest way to get data for us. We definitely have a significant amount of competition, both in the Atlanta metropolitan area, in our own region, but then even with our programs, all of us have a business program. We can all say it's great, but really it's very same to each other, right? And so competing in an online industry makes it challenging there too, and for a lot of competition. And then last challenge is just bandwidth. The team gets tired, And as a state university, resources aren't so intense that we can quickly add individuals. It usually has to be done every budget year, with, of course, additional resources coming in. And so being able to keep up with these different pieces is a bit of a challenge for the staff. Okay. I'll
Okay.
turn to Chris.
Chris.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. You hear me okay? There we go, that's better. My name is Chris Mott. I serve as Associate Vice President of Enrollment Management at Northern Arizona University, which is located in Flagstaff, Arizona. It is not hot there. It snows a ton. I always get that question, how do you survive the heat? I don't. I shovel snow constantly. So that's pretty much my life for the next 6 months, in case you want to know what I'll be doing. I'm really going to focus today on the external partnership we created to deal with stop outs specifically. So this has been kind of touched on already. I'm going to kind of do a little deeper dive into work we've done with an external partner to really deliver enrollment in that area and the corresponding efficiencies it's brought to us as a university that really might not have too much to do with stop outs specifically, that have really driven enrollment. First, a little bit about NAU. Like I said, we're in Flagstaff, Arizona. We've got about 22,000 students across about 20 statewide campuses, our main campus, and then online, and over 200 programs. 66% of our students are Arizona residents, with the remaining being out of state. And we are also charged with an access mission. So you'll notice we have 25% of our students are Hispanic. We are a first-gen focused institution with 46% of our students being first-gen, and we have 80 plus tribal nations represented on our campus. So very diverse population on campus. Our Board of Regents has recently given us the additional charge of also being a driver of economic mobility in the state of Arizona. We're 26,000 bachelor's degrees short of supporting the Arizona economy. So we've got some work to do to deliver on that. So when we kind of looked at the traditional enrollment funnel, we didn't like what we were seeing, right? So I've never seen anything like this in my 22 years in higher ed. And actually, luckily enough, before I was in higher ed, I was in beer, in the beer industry, which doesn't really have a direct correlation, but this cliff makes you want to drink for some reason. And we're the deep red state there. That's like, we're going to really fall off the cliff. So the traditional channels weren't going to work. We buy every name in the nation. It seems like our tertiary markets are kind of expanded out as far as we can take them at this point. So we really had to start looking at what other markets could we really hit to grow enrollment. And that's where we really started to focus in on the stop out population and our previously admitted, never attended population. Okay, so who's got a boss in here? His name was boss in this room right now? Your boss is in this room? Oh, okay. All right. Who works in enrollment management where your enrollment management department thinks you can do everything all the time? See, there's a hand stand down on purpose. I work in one of those institutions. I love my vice president dearly, but we are the constant superheroes. We can do everything all the time. Same number of resources, same budget, doesn't matter. We'll make it work. And we usually do. But when we looked at the sheer number associated with our stop outs and the number of students we admit who don't come to our university since 2004, it was mind-boggling. 580,000 students. When we put some filters on that to kind of take the students off who had high account balances, who couldn't enroll, maybe some other flags they're in our 2 NAU program, so they're already kind of they're coming to NAU eventually system, it still only went down to 365,000. We could not look at that number and say we can effectively recruit, enroll, and have those students persist at our university. It just wasn't going to be doable. So we had that self-reflective moment of we might need some help here.
What's magic about 2004?
I think that was really the period where we figured if we were to look at stop outs and previously admitted, never attended, you're still in an age group where you might have a degree completed. You go much further in that, you might start getting into a stage where maybe they're not as focused on college anymore. So we really wanted to focus there. But it brings up an interesting point, is that the student's different, right? I did not, well, I was really dancing with my language there. Did you notice that? I was like, how do I say this? But that was one of the problems too, is like, as a primarily first year institution, we had to realize we weren't great at servicing non-traditional adult students. We didn't have a lot of expertise in it. We dabbled from time to time. We'd send out a comm here and there, all ad hoc, but it just, there was nothing systematically good about what we were doing. Because adult students they just have different needs. They need more engagement, more touch points, more support. And we just did not think at that number we could scale and effectively do it. So we actually partnered with My Footpath to help us support in those efforts, because they do have that expertise. And they really, for us, have done an amazing job of providing, kind of mirroring us. So if you're a student, you don't really notice that there's a difference. So it appears that they're NAU, but the support they give the student has really been great, and it has really played out into some amazing student and revenue figures. So who's got a CFO?
Yeah, that's the slide your CFO wants to see.
Yeah. So we started right at pandemic, some good early results, but pandemic wasn't obviously the greatest time to launch this. But since the pandemic, the enrollment growth we've seen from this is 5 times growth with a north of a $21 million revenue. We could not have done this on our own. And really that's the support coming from that partnership. But it's been great in that these partnerships can't last forever. Eventually, as an institution, we're going to have to pivot to be able to do this on our own. And the one thing that we've loved about this relationship is that where we weren't good at it before, and a lot of the processes and a lot of the tactics that go along with working with adult students, we've gradually started to learn over the relationship. Up to the point where we have just recently launched our own program. It's called Jack's on Track, which mirrors the support we're getting from My Footpath, but it's a result of what we've learned from their best practices during this time. So this isn't a relationship that just goes on and on and on forever, and then once you pull the plug on it, all of a sudden that revenue goes away. It's a learning opportunity for us as an institution to really learn how to do this effectively. So some of the things we've learned over time is that we had some really bad processes. Like, it was like really bad. And I say that as the person that oversaw admissions processing. I think we had to take a really good look in the mirror and say, what are we doing where we're just getting in our own way? So the first thing we saw is, we're going out, we're trying to re-recruit these students as readmits, and our readmission application was a PDF form that you had to print out, scan, mail back. And then the office that processed it took, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks maybe to process it. What do you think happened to that student in that 3 to 4 weeks they were waiting to be readmitted to their program when they finally got the courage to say, okay, I'll do this, I'll go back? Gone. We were at a 6% yield in that process. We've digitized that process, and we've dedicated a service team now to same day processing of those readmit applicants, and we're up to 66% yield on those. So it's put us in a position to focus on niche populations where, although the number is small relative to our entire population, focusing resources on where you can yield the most has been important.
Mention the big brother living down the street that you get to compete with at Phoenix.
Huh? No, we're not going to talk about them.
Where you can start every, 8 weeks or something?
Yeah. So it's an interesting point, Mike, because the competitive landscape in Arizona is pretty intense. We've got ASU and U of A, obviously, who are our Tri-U partners, but you've got privates in the state like Grand Canyon and University of Phoenix and many others who they're offering same day admission. They're offering all of these things where, they contact a student, and that day that student's enrolled in classes. And, in academia, some of us might raise eyebrows at that, but that's a competitive advantage that we had to step up to if we were going to win in this space. Outside of the readmits, we had to really look at our processes for even our just normal transfer in first year and grad populations. We used to take about 30 days to admit either a first year or a transfer student. And a large part of that was just simple transcript processing. just the act of like just literally punching in course number, course prefix, course title, it just took so long and it was so cumbersome, and really the same concept. We were just losing the student in that process. We brought on some OCR technology in our transcript processing now that has cut our transcript processing times to 2 days. And then in that 2 days, now we are able to deliver the admission decision in that same cadence. So we've really started to be able to compete in that space, both at a first year and transfer and non-traditional space. Grad admissions has also become a lot more efficient. I've got a former colleague of mine in the room who can speak to this. David, this might be near and dear to your heart. But our admissions department doesn't control grad processes per se. Departments do, faculty do those reviews. But we put the infrastructure in place to make their evaluation process a lot more efficient. So we've been able to reduce timeline to decision through the departments by about half over the course of the last year. We've also developed great relationships with the provost department and with the dean of the graduate college to really work with those departments to assess, do you really need everything that you're asking for on applications? Like, do you need the 2 writing samples? Do you really need those GRE scores? Do you need the background check? Some programs, yes, but not all, right? So really evaluating, like, what do you actually need to review a student, and really getting those refined down to just, really what they need has really helped in those processes a lot and gotten those decisions out a lot faster for grad students who, again, have a lot of schools competing for their attention. For our transfer students, we have done a tremendous amount of work on making their external coursework mean something at NAU. We used to be the classic, in order for us to give you NAU equivalency, you had to submit a syllabi from the course you took somewhere else, and then the faculty had to review it. Maybe that took 2 or 3 weeks, but again, same concept. In that time, you are losing the student. With that same relationship with the provost's office, we can now equate on title only, institution to institution. If it's not a title match, we can just use a short snippet from a tool like Transferology to tell us, does this relatively look correct? So our admissions office now can basically articulate everything for that student right there on the spot, no delay. Some faculty involvement here and there where we're a little unsure about it, but it's really helped streamline. So now what you have is, for our students, you have I get admitted in 2 days, I have my transfer credit posted and articulated in that same 2-day cadence, and now I'm sitting in front of an advisor on day 3 to get enrolled. And that looks a lot different, not just for our readmit population or our previously admitted, never attended population, but really for everybody. So it's really been a function of what can we not do on our own to better leverage a market, and then how do you get better at what you're already doing to squeeze that funnel just a little tighter. And then the last thing on this is just the financial aid packaging. My colleague in Austin, I don't know how she accomplished this, but 45 to 10 days is amazing. So anytime you can give a student that kind of an answer on what their financial health will look like going to college, it's just the better off you're going to be.